time they get up here. Because that's their choice. That's exactly right. Welcome.
And we believe in choice.
We do, and we believe in being outspoken. And as this woman, this lovely woman who I know, might know, I do love audience interaction. So you can do it with me, but you can't do it with our speakers. That's the only rule here. Welcome. My name is Bonnie Levison, and I am really happy to be here. I've had an awesome. It's been about 2 weeks where I've had 2 workshops with the 6 people you are going to hear from, and it was my great pleasure. This is, as you know, I want to first of all thank Rory, who runs the commission. Who runs the Commission on Aging. Is that right? You have 2. Oh, you have 2 hands. That's right, 2 hands. And also the great idea maker in our town and a creative genius branding expert who came up with this whole idea, Bobby Eggers, who is standing over here. And she actually is working with Commission on Aging and other, and has lots of clients in rebranding their image and has been coming to an event that we've been holding here at the Greenwich Historical Society in this beautiful barn on this beautiful campus for 9 years. And it's called Story Barn. And so tonight we are Story Barn in collaboration with the Commission on Aging Live Well Lived. So it's a special edition of Story Barn. And tonight you're going to hear true personal stories from 6 residents of our community who are over the age of 45. And that's what we're going to leave it. That's what we said. And it's up to them whether they want to share it with you. But the thing I want to tell you, spending these many hours with these incredible people, is that there's something going on around here because this is where you want to get old. Yeah. These people are the youngest people I have ever met. They are so sharp, so beautiful. So anyway, you're going to find out for yourself. So I was like, I don't know who the sponsors. First of all, thank you guys. This is an incredible organization. It's so much fun. Thank you for all you do. But for this event, I'm telling you, there's like the Fountain of Youth in Greenwich. I think it should be the Real Estate Commission should do this because people will move here when they see how great it is to grow up here. And so you're going to hear personal stories. I work for an organization called The Moth. And I don't know if anybody's ever heard of it. Anybody heard of it? It's a great. I love the applause. Thank you so much for that. And anyway, we're a storytelling organization out of New York City, and we know that everyone has a story. And we put people on stage, and we have them tell stories from their lives. So tonight, we're going to have your own sort of storytelling experience. 6 people. We've given them a time limit of about 8 minutes. And the storytellers are all floating around here. Joel's nodding his head in an awkward, yeah, 8 minutes, And if they tend to go just particularly long, I'll wave at you like this in a gentle way, saying, yeah, we're going to find your way to your ending. And if they go on for 30, 40 minutes, hour and a half, I will throw myself physically onto the microphone and grab it from them. No, I won't. They're all in great shape. I think you're going to have a good time. So I'm so excited. It was such a pleasure working with all of them. And so tonight we're going to take you back in time, which the Greenwich Historical Society actually does every single day. It preserves the stories of our past, and and we're making those stories now. It's sort of what Story Barn is all about. We are the stories of the future, so it's really fun to take these stories from small moments in your life or big moments in your life. The challenge to these 6 wonderful people was to pick a moment or experience in your life that was meaningful. Don't tell the story of your whole life. We're looking for one experience. And so I think you'll hear a variety of different tales, and it's going to take you back in time to times in Greenwich and also around the world. I'm no kid myself, and I was thinking about getting older, and it's hard, and I go to restaurants, and I remember, and it was my late 40s. It was pretty long ago, and I'm going, what is the deal? Why is the font so small? And what did they do with the light in this restaurant? What is wrong with them? You know, so I started using the reading. I didn't want to tell you the number. I'm probably on like 82 at this point of my readers. And my teeth got really brown, and my dentist asked me why, and I realized because I can't see what anything is. You know, I don't know what the shampoo is, or the shaving cream, or the conditioner, and I've been brushing my teeth with my self-tanner because I have no idea what anything is. It's terrible. And you know, as you get older, phrases start having new meaning. You know, like rubbernecking. No, it's not about traffic anymore. It is actually the literal version, rubbernecking. And then of course there's that time of the month, which is now paying my bills. All that is. And sometimes it takes a while for people to get the joke, and I appreciate the late laugh. And then of course there's getting lucky. Yes, that is finding my car in the parking lot. But what you're going to see tonight is like aging is cool, and as my friends say, it's better than the alternative. So hey, enjoy it, and which I do. And so they're going to take you back in time. And I was sort of thinking about Greenwich and back in time for me. I've lived here almost 30 years, and one of my earliest memories of being in Greenwich. I had little kids, and I dropped them off at school, and Greenwich Avenue was a lot different in the early 90s, and I just heard nicer. It was nicer. And well, it's nice in its own way. It's still beautiful. And but in those days, we had not a Starbucks, but we had a little teeny coffee shop. If anybody remembers, at the top called Coffee Tree. Do you remember the Coffee Tree? Yes. Oh, it was just charming. And it was, you know, 7:45 in the morning. As far as I'm concerned, an ungodly hour that I just dropped my kids off, and I'm sitting in the little coffee tree, squished in. And I've got my, you know, mocha something or other that I'm drinking, and I'm sort of cranky, and some guy comes in sort of behind me, and it's springtime, it's probably around this time of year, and I'm thinking, what jerk, I probably used a worse word than that, brought his two Great Danes into the coffee shop. Like, it's just so ridiculous. People are horrible. Can you believe that? And I'm still drinking my coffee, judging away. And the man next to me, and there's this commotion, and he's like, lady, you got to get out of here. I'm like, why? And he goes, 2 deer just ran into the coffee tree. Are you blind? And it really happened. It was a screen door, and these deer are going crazy. So everyone is rushed out onto Greenwich Avenue. And I'm like, oh my gosh, and I'm standing there, the police come, it's chaos, and my mocha cappuccino is still inside the coffee tree. And I was very upset about that. But that was my first memorable experience in Greenwich, and I thought, this is not that quiet little country place that I thought it was. A very exciting place. But you're going to hear real stories from people, and they're going to take you back in time, as I said. And so we're going to, we've got an order, and rather you all have a little program there, and in your program, you can read all sorts of things about their lives. And so I'm not going to go into their bios. You can take your time with that. But what I've done is I've asked them a question. And so I'm going to introduce each of our storytellers by way of a question. And the question is, can you tell me one of your favorite musicians, songs, or bands? And so maybe we get to know them a little better in that way. So our first storyteller, I want to make sure I have this correct, excuse me. Hold on. Okay, when asked who is her favorite musician or song, she gave me both, and she said one of her favorite musicians is the musician Randy Newman, and he sings that song, Short People. Short people have no reason. You know that one? I'm a tall person. I'm like, I love that too. Absolutely. And I said, why? She said, well, he just makes me smile. And I think Marianne's going to make us smile a little bit. So please welcome Marianne Hoberman. Can everyone hear me? Yes. Okay. I'm very nervous. I have to tell you that. Don't be. Okay, don't be. Okay. Yeah. I love your necklace. Thank you. Beautiful. It's my mom's. Thank you very much. I still but anyway. You're a mom friend. And I'm used to speaking in public, but this is very different. I'm not exactly sure why, but
Anyway, bear with me. When I was a little girl, more than 80 years ago, my mother taught me a prayer to say before I went to sleep. And I'm sure we all know it, and many of us say it, or did say it. Now I lay me down to sleep and pray the Lord my soul to keep. And then she stopped. She didn't tell me about the dying part. And then we went into this whole list of God blesses. So it was God bless mommy, God bless daddy, God bless grandma, God bless my little brother. And as time went by, the list got augmented. I had more friends, I had cousins. At the end, I blessed whatever dog I had currently, because my mother didn't like dogs. And so as soon as my father brought one home, she made this life rather miserable, but he never gave up. But anyway, and at the end, I had my own special thing that I said to myself. My mother wasn't there. I said, please, dear God, please make me a good girl tomorrow. But that prayer was never answered. My mother always called me a bad girl. I talked back. I had a big mouth. I wasn't nice to my little brother. And because I had a big mouth, she slapped me. She slapped me across my face regularly. And my father, in those days, it was okay. In these days, I'm not so sure. I would get spankings, hard spankings. And I would go bawling up to my room. And this happened regularly. And it was not very nice. My mother would say, every time I say this, everybody nods in recognition, just wait till your father gets home. And when my father got home, if he was in a good mood, he'd kind of, brush off my mother and we're okay for tonight. But if he was in a bad mood, if something had gone wrong during the day, and he had a pretty terrible temper, he would take it out on me and I would get spanked. And I was collateral damage for my parents' not very happy marriage. But at the same time, I remember my childhood as being a wonderful, wonderful childhood. I loved being a child. And I remember specifically that I was standing in the garden. We had moved to Stamford by then, moved there when I was 5 years old. And I'm standing, maybe some of you know this, right across the street from Stamford Hospital, 193 West Broad Street. It's still there. The house looks just the same. And I'm standing in the little side yard, and it comes to me that I don't want to grow up. Because why? Because grown-ups don't play. And I love to play. I love to play with my little brother. I love to play with my friends. But most of all, I love to play by myself. And what I loved to do most of all was to get on my swing in the backyard and swing back and forth, higher and higher until my toes touched the 2 magnolia trees, which I've noticed are still there. And I'd make up little poems and stories and songs to the rhythm of going back and forth. And it was, of course, an escape for me. And so when things weren't going too right in my regular life, I could retreat into this life of my own. And it was really bliss. I still remember it. I just remember that rhythm of going back and forth and making up those songs. So I also knew from the very early days really, before we got to Stanford. So we lived in New Haven before that, and so that was, we moved to Stanford when I was, just before I was 5. So back in New Haven, there I was, 4 years old, 3 years old, that I was going to be a writer when I grew up. It seems, now it seems sort of, how did I know that? But I did. I remember it specifically. And it was because I love fairy tales. And when I learned that, for example, Hans Christian Andersen had written some of the fairy tales that I really loved, that a real person had written these fairy tales instead of them coming down, given to us by maybe God. I thought, that's what I want to do when I grow up. And so all during these years, what I would do from the time that, before I could write, I was making up these little songs and stories. Until I went off to college, I was keeping diaries, I was writing little songs, or making them up, not writing them down really, writing poetry, sometimes sending off things, of all things. I don't even know, my family certainly didn't get the New Yorker, but I would send things off to the New Yorker when I was in high school. Then, of course, get them back again. I could have, like many writers, I could have papered a room with all my, but I did it, and I wrote lots of poems, worked on the school paper, edited the high school yearbook, got to college and was a reporter for the paper. And all the time I was going to write either the great American novel, that was what everyone was going to write then, or at any rate, a great American novel. But mostly I was thinking I was going to write the great American poem. But then something happened. I fell in love. I was in college, it was my senior year, and I met a boy on a blind date. And 4 months later, we had gotten engaged and we'd gotten married in 4 months. I met him in the fall, was married February 4th, 1950. And that was fine. And then, in those days, no birth control really, but I hadn't really put in my in my talk, but maybe I've gotten too far. Anyway, one of my friends had insisted that I go off to a doctor, and contraception was illegal then. And it was in Massachusetts and Connecticut. I went off to a Boston doctor and got a, whatever you call those things, interview, whatever. Anyway, so I really wasn't expecting to have children right away because, I was gotten married, but that wasn't going to stop me from doing what I was going to do, be a great writer. 4 years later, I had 3 kids. The oldest of them was not 3 yet. And I don't know, I was exhausted, and all my plans of, going to work on a newspaper and being a reporter, because that's the way you did work your way up those days, etc. Of course, that was all gone. Norm, my husband, was at the Harvard Graduate School of Design studying to be an architect on the GI Bill. And I was there with the kids. And I just loved my children. It wasn't that. I loved my husband, but I was depressed. And I just, what was I going to do? I would go, the days, I remember making a list of what I did during the day and how long it took. And my days really had to have at least 40 hours in order to do everything that I seemed to do in the 24, without sleep. I'd go into the bathroom and sit down on the toilet seat and try to write. But nothing came. I couldn't concentrate. I was just so exhausted. And so there I was, happy and not happy at the same time, but really thinking, I don't know, it wasn't a good time. I went off and even saw a therapist but it was too expensive, so I couldn't go on seeing him. Anyway, but meanwhile, the one compensation, the one outlet that I had for any kind of creativity that I had was making up little songs and stories for my kids when I put them to bed at night. And that happened so spontaneously and instinctively that I didn't really think about it in those terms. I just do now, in retrospect, realize that really saved me. And so I never bothered to write them down. We got all these things memorized, little songs and things, and that's what we did at night when I put them to bed. And then one day in the fall, I was walking along, pushing either 2 or 3 kids in a carriage, I don't know how many. And it was fall, so there were dry leaves on the ground, and I was walking along, kicking up the leaves, and something popped into my head in the rhythm of the walking, and it was, all my shoes come in twos. All my shoes come in twos. And I thought, God, that would be a cute title for a children's picture book. And I knew that I had adored shoes when I was a kid and went around in my mother's high heel shoes, and now my daughter was doing the same. And I was doing shoes. Children are very intrigued with shoes. So I went home and I wrote a bunch of little verses about shoes. And I asked Norm if he would make some pictures, and he did. And I got them together in a packet, and I got a manila, one of the large manila envelopes, and I self-addressed and stamped it, because that's what you did in those days, so that they could send back your manuscript. And I mailed it off to a publisher in Boston where I'd been doing some freelance proofreading. And I kind of forgot about it. And life went on. My depression went on. And then my demi-depression, I was still having a good time with these children. Oh, yes, buddy, okay. And then one day a letter came in the mail. I went out to Porch to get it. And it was not that manila envelope. It was a skinny white envelope. And any writer knows, in those days, it's different now, of course. You set things down on the computer. They wanted to publish this book. So I went racing off down to Harvard. It was about 3 blocks away to the studio where Norm was, waving this envelope. And I walked screaming into the studio, and everyone thought I was a maniac, of course. And I said, they want to publish our book. And then all of a sudden I realized I left the children at home. So I raced back, and they were still sleeping. And now, 45 books later and counting, I'm still, I think, that little girl with a big mouth who likes to make up songs and stories and little songs. Wow.
Marianne Hoberman. For those of you who don't know her, you can read her bio, but yeah, did you hear that number? 45 books. 45 books, and she's about to publish a work of poetry in 2020 that will be published. And she is not 60 years old.
88.
88 years old. Marianne, I have to say, I was thinking about the rhyming and all of that, and so for later on this evening, I challenge you to come up with rhymes for orange, silver, purple, dangerous, and discombobulated. I looked up the hardest words to rhyme. They're close to impossible. We can do it. So later we will talk about that with her. That was awesome. Okay, our next speaker coming to the stage, his favorite band is the Beatles. Do we need to say anything else? It's just kind of obvious. And then he said, yeah, as a group and as singers too, just in case you didn't think I loved them enough. Please welcome Richard Nemchek.
Hi,
Hi.
I taught fifth grade, and so I'm sort of used to standing in front of a room, but in fifth grade, no one's listening. I turned 23 in the psychiatric ward of Stanford Hospital during my first 6-week stay there. My fiancée, Debbie, visited me there with a large gift-wrapped present for my birthday, and things that had brought me pleasure couldn't at that time. But with a little coaxing, I eventually unwrapped the gift and peered inside. And it was a box. I opened it up and it was filled with popcorn, just popcorn. And I thought to myself, with tears coming out of my eyes, this woman who I loved and had planned to marry in 3 months really gets me. And now I'm going to lose her. I was on a cocktail of an antidepressant and an antipsychotic, and I was experiencing dry mouth like you wouldn't believe. So there's no way I could have eaten that popcorn. And through the lens of my depression, the tenderness of her gesture was just salt on my psychic wound. Debbie was young, she was attractive, she had an Ivy League degree under her belt and was very close to earning a second. She had a promising career as an occupational therapist ahead of her and a healthcare administrator. She could have easily said, Richard, I love you, and I've loved the 5 years that we've spent together, but I don't need this shit. But she didn't. We were married just 2 months later than we had originally planned. But what neither of us knew at that time was that this would be a recurring thing. Depression, anxiety, paranoia would strike again and again. At 29, shortly after the birth of our first child, I was in the same psych ward for my second 6-week stay. Debbie, who was a first-time mom at the time, had to get herself ready, get the baby ready, get Kara to daycare, drop her off, get herself to work. I believe she was pumping breast milk at work at that time. And then she had to work all day at her very responsible job, leave work, go get Kara, get her home, get herself and Kara fed, ready for bed. But somehow she was able to squeeze in visits to the hospital to see me while I was there. And over the next 5 years, we welcomed Kara's 2 younger brothers, Dennis and Kyle. Having an official diagnosis the second time, and the fact that I recovered from the first bout, gave me the glimmer of hope that I still cling to. The good news is I've never had to be hospitalized since that second time. The not so good news is that I had to walk away from jobs and opportunities during relapses. And I spent close to 2 years sleeping on a couch in a Risperdal-induced stupor, during which I was quite afraid that Debbie was going to have had enough and leave me. No marriage comes with a guarantee, but challenges kind of stack up when mental illness is thrown into the mix, because you have its stigma, shame, and then there are the side effects of medication like weight gain and memory issues. But Debbie and I loved being parents, and I do remember our family bedtime ritual of prayers, stories, and songs. And there were, we had a life, we built a life. We had swim lessons, Little League, camping trips, paper routes, and we took almost yearly vacations to Sanibel Island. We enjoyed each of the 6 dogs that we adopted and the 1 cat that adopted us. And I particularly remember the day that Debbie explained gravity to our kids. She said, on Earth, life is designed to always pull things down. So everybody's going to fall sooner or later. That's no big deal. But since she couldn't always be there to catch them, what mattered, she said, was that they each had to learn how to get back up. The metaphor, I'm sure, went over their little heads, but a light bulb sure went up off in mine. When I needed hope, Debbie's hope gave it to me. And when I needed strength, Debbie's strength gave it to me. We're going to fast forward 32 years. Debbie and I are 61. An MRI shows that Debbie has a growth in the optic chiasm of her brain. And after undergoing surgery to have it removed, Debbie suffers 2 postoperative strokes. She's hospitalized for 112 consecutive days. For those of you not mathematically inclined, that's 16 weeks. My sole role during her lengthy hospitalization is basically bedside companion. Her nurses did everything for her, except for twice daily, I would spoon feed her a magic cup frozen dessert when she eventually relearned how to swallow. Debbie is discharged and she comes home in a wheelchair and she's virtually blind in her left eye. And then it hits me. I am now Debbie's full-time caregiver and I have no idea what the hell I'm doing. She sleeps in a hospital bed in our first floor family room and uses a walker for balance. A follow-up MRI shows that the residual tumor that the surgeon couldn't get is growing back. So Debbie has to undergo 30 radiation treatments, 5 times a week for 6 weeks. And she has countless outpatient, OT, PT, speech therapy appointments, and frequent follow-up sessions with each of her numerous doctors. But over time, we are able to say bye-bye wheelchair, bye-bye walker, bye-bye hospital bed. And so once again, we're sleeping upstairs in our own bedroom, in our own bed. And remarkably, Debbie even danced with our son, Dennis, at his wedding, which was delayed 5.5 months so that we both could attend. Not only does her brain have to repair itself, but Debbie's body has to deal with a host of collateral damage done to it by the tumor. The most debilitating of which is dementia. Debbie's brain, to use a euphemism, plays tricks on her all the time, but she's not always aware that it's doing so. But that's like how when I am paranoid. When I'm paranoid, I don't realize that it's paranoia. And paranoia, by the way, if you've never suffered from it, is basically my brain telling me things that are not aligned with reality, but I believe them. Why do I believe them? Because it's my brain telling me, and when my brain is healthy, it doesn't lie to me. Debbie's brain never lied to her for 61 years of her life. So I learned to pray. I pray for comfort, strength, and hope. That's the life-sustaining combination that my spirit needs to keep my own demons at bay. But always at the forefront of my awareness is I am now the captain of the ship, and I'm the one who needs to keep it afloat, while my first mate is below deck in sickbay. But compared to when Debbie was the captain of the ship, I've actually got it a lot easier. I'm basically in retirement. I don't have a full-time managerial position that I have to maintain at the same time. And those little children that she had are now adults. And so I can lean on them and we can lean on each other. It's our daughter, Kara, in fact, who suggests that we look into River House. It's an adult day program right here in Costco. We tour it. It took her a long time to convince me to even tour it, but we tour it in July of 2017, but it takes me until November to agree to actually give it a try. Later that same month, on Debbie's 63rd birthday, I discovered that Debbie can read again, rather fluently. This fact percolates for about 14 months. And then I approach Donna Spellman, the executive director of River House, with an idea that I have for a volunteer program for the two of us, Debbie and me. And so the two of us come to River House. In fact, we were there this morning. We do this on Fridays at 10:30 with 2 rocking chairs and 6 thematically related picture books and songs for an hour-long program that we call Rockin' Reads. And it is therapeutic for both of us on just so many levels. So what Debbie instinctively understood and accepted at age 23 has taken me an additional 40 years of living to fully grasp. Life never gets easier, you just get stronger. And I think I have finally distilled occupational therapy, Debbie's chosen career, down to its essence. Okay, this happened. Now together, let's make the best of it. And although we're cursed in some ways, Debbie and I have been blessed in many more. 16 months ago, our first grandchild, Sophie, was born. But at the top of our list of blessings is the fact that I fell in love with, and I married a stand-by-your man kind of woman. And Debbie fell in love with, and married a stand-by-your woman kind of man. So as an additional kind of therapeutic outlet for me, and to allay Debbie's fear that she voices from time to time, that I may actually fall out of love with her and leave. Last year, we redeclared in the most public way our love for one another. Side by side, holding hands, we stood under a chuppah at Temple Sinai in Stanford, and together we defied gravity. Thank you.
And Debbie is right here. Tissues are available in the back of the house. Richard, that was beautiful. And I was reading your bio, and one of the things I happen to love is that was it 1,000 days to celebrate your 1,000 days since your surgery. Some people might go to the Four Seasons, but they went to a place that I admire, their favorite diner. That is what they did. Which one is it?
Well, it's actually in West Haverstraw, New York, very close to Helen Hayes Hospital, which is where Debbie did her acute inpatient rehab. And they have a dorm there. So to save the commute back and forth, I could stay up to 3 consecutive nights. So I had to eat. Because visiting hours are very strict. 9 o'clock, you're out. So now I have to have dinner. So I discovered Hogan's Family Diner. And I basically said a prayer that one day I would like to eat there with Debbie, because it would mean she's not on the inside, she's on the outside. And the manager, when I was there by myself, I was by myself, he came over and we were chatting. And that particular night, he said, anything you want for dessert, it's on the house. So we wanted to go back and thank him for that. And I wanted to introduce Debbie.
And he is not a paid spokesperson for Hogan's Diner. Just want to point that out. Now, our next storyteller, I think we're just going to let her tell her story from her chair. This is her favorite musician is Frank Sinatra, and somehow no surprise. And I said, so which of his wonderful songs from his songbook is it your favorite? She just looked at me. She said, I did it my way, of course. And Ruth Wilson is going to do it her way right now. I'm going to bring the microphone over to you, to this beautiful lady.
Testing, testing.
Yeah.
We don't want feedback. Okay, are you hearing me? Okay. And we're going to pass this over to Ruth. And we're just, forgive the technical difficulties, but we are going to figure this out. Ruth, are you okay holding it, or would you like me to hold it for you? You're okay to hold it?
You have to be really, really old to get this treatment. My earliest childhood memories come from the impersonal world of Bronx orphanage. Memories seared in my mind and soul and remembered as if they happened yesterday. From the age of 2, each day started the same, getting rooted out of our cribs, standing on a chair to be given a sponge bath, and lining up countless times a day, holding hands with another child and marching from place to place, both inside and outside. In the evening, joining a long line of kneeling children, saying bedtime prayers, and lastly, finding my crib among rows and rows of cribs. Certain days stand out starkly from the numbing daily routine. Christmas is such a day. If you were lucky enough to have a relative or friend visit on Christmas Day, you were taken down to an auditorium. Usually the visitor brought a gift, and we were able to sit with the visitor. The gifts were distributed to the recipient children. And one Christmas, I was thrilled to receive a life-size doll. After all the gifts had been opened, then we marched back upstairs to the nursery department. There, awaiting on our tables, was a new toothbrush, a new toothpaste, a box of hard Christmas candy, and an orange. I never saw my life-size doll again until the day I left the orphanage for good. Another incident stands out in my memory. I was closed in a room for several hours by myself. I must have done something extremely naughty, but to this day I don't know what it was. The room in which I was confined was used for our monthly haircuts. In it was a chair like a captain's chair with high legs. We sat in it to get our haircut. I spent the time closed in the room, climbing up and down the chair. As the day crawled on and it started to get dark, I needed to go to the bathroom, but I was terrified to ask anyone. So eventually I wet my pants. When I finally was released from the room to go to dinner, I spent a physically uncomfortable evening before bedtime. When I turned 5, I learned that my aunt and uncle were going to take my sister and me into their home in Costco to raise us. That is the day I re-met my life-size doll. I wonder if any of you have ever had the experience of walking in the grass for the first time at age 5, feeling the grass under your feet and smelling it and touching it instead of walking on cement sidewalks. The sheer joy of going outdoors when I wanted, feeling the warmth of the sun on my body, and looking up straight into the sky, seeing clouds and trees and birds uncluttered by windows and buildings. It wasn't long before I realized I had exchanged one tyranny for another. I learned soon enough that my aunt was the boss of all she surveyed, including my uncle. In 2nd grade, my best friend told her mother that we had homework to do. I was unaware that we had homework. Well, I got straightened out about that night. From then on, I was very diligent about studying and finishing all assignments. In my senior year, I started dating my husband-to-be. When we decided to get married, my aunt wanted us to wait until June. My one act of defiance to her was to set the date for June 1st. While living with my aunt, I had always had a desperate, soul-searing longing to belong. I felt like an imposter of that family group. I belonged to all of my peer groups, but never the family group. When at the end of her life, my aunt was hospitalized and on her deathbed, out of the blue, she told me she loved me and had always loved me. When I left the hospital, I went to my sisters and cried because I finally was good enough to be loved and belong. I cried too, with regret for all the years that might have been. I realize now in retrospect that I've been blessed my whole life. But until I was validated and was worthy to be loved, I couldn't recognize or accept my blessing. I owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to my aunt for the gift of the present life that I am living, and for learning the importance of giving and receiving love in my life and anybody's life, all of life.
Ruth, welcome. Isn't that gorgeous? Ruth, can you let everyone know how old you are, if you don't mind?
Oh, 101.
101. Isn't she amazing? I want to share with you the fact that we had our first meeting, and it was a number of hours, and Ruth, everybody was there, and we were all talking about, ideas for their stories. And we talked about it, and we had a little conversation with Ruth, and she quietly took some notes, and then left. And then she came back to the next meeting, and I thought, I don't know what she's going to come back with, and we'll probably have to talk some more. And out she pulls a little pad of handwritten story, and that was it. And I said, don't you change one thing. That is gorgeous. She went home, she took every single note and took all that and created and shared that beautiful story from being in an orphanage. Unbelievable, Ruth. You are really an inspiration. I did want to mention, we're halfway through, we've got 3 more to go. We are being live streamed. For those of you who don't know what that means, most of my friends, I didn't used to know what that means, so anybody who is standing by a stream, that is not what this is about. Hello out there in Streamland. It's over there. So if you want to be on, Big Brother watching you, you can't hide anymore, right? Wave to the camera. It's a big crowd. We're having a really good time. We wish you were here at the barn, but thank you for joining us via live stream. I feel very technological right now. Okay. By the way, I have to say this. If you saw Ruth's bio, she said that she was in Cascade when they were building I-95, which is an assumption for all of us. And one of her favorite things to do as a mother was to take her children to watch them building I-95 because that was fun. I think that's did anybody become an engineer? I just want to know. Did anybody become an engineer or a concrete?
I mean, that was where my children, my kindergarten did that.
Oh, it was your students.
All first grade.
Oh, wow. That's so interesting. We didn't have that. We did go to the bridge from Greenwich Country Day School. They would bring my children to the bridge to do this to the truck drivers. Anybody do that? And that they would do that. So that's the closest thing that my kids had to that. But you're amazing. Okay, our next storyteller, when asked one of her favorite groups, I've got to get your proper, I want to make sure I have it. When she said, well, there are so many musicians that I like, and she said, well, if you read my bio and hear my story, you're going to know. And I said, well, then what is there a general genre? She just says, I like anything peppy. I like peppy music and it makes me move, and that's what I like. So please welcome to the stage Geraldine, or Jerry, Christopherson. Would you like to do this one? I think so. Well, then we're going to just, no, this is the one that works. I'm going to move this to you over here. Is that all right? Or, sorry, folks.
Can you hear me?
No, we want to. We want to, the lot people out there in the world can't hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Very good, I hope. Good evening, everyone. I just want to tell you, Ruth Wilson, I've known for 60 years. She was my youngest daughter's kindergarten teacher. I love her dearly. I was born in the Bronx and moved to Costco, Connecticut at a very young age. My parents said we're moving to the country. They considered that on Cinnaway Road, where they bought our home, the country. And my brother and I went to Costco school. My 2 children, 3 children actually, and my 2 oldest grandchildren. And it was just great. We always loved it. And on Sunday, Dad and Mother would put us in the car and take us to visit our cousins. Because then everyone was nearby and you could visit, not like it is today, we're scattered all over. The grown-ups would go in the living room and the children would go in another spare room, put the radio on, and start dancing. And that's how I started to dance as well. We did jitterbug, 2-step, you name it. We were teaching each other, and it was a lot of fun. I actually had a great childhood. Then when the World War II came, my brother was a lieutenant in the Marines, and my boyfriend at the time was in the Navy. And I had a lot of friends and relatives that were in World War II. And my dad, just before the war ended, lost my dad at the age of 51. But before the war ended, as soon as he died, shortly after when the war ended, I got married. Had my children, and I was a stay-at-home mom, which I loved. I did a lot of community volunteering, and my husband built our home. He was builder, and he built our home up at Stanwich Road, where we raised our daughters, did a lot of chauffeuring, but we didn't really mind. It was still a lot of fun. Then the time came when they married and we had an empty nest. And in 1970, I got a call that they needed a coordinator in the rummage around thrift shop out in Banksville. It was sponsored by the Stanwich Congregational Church. That job was my salvation. It got me out of the house. I had wonderful volunteers, customers coming in, donors, and it was just great because I didn't have to, well, I was in an empty house, so that was very fulfilling. And my mother died in 75 and my husband died in 1978. So that was really a great salvation to be out doing all this. Then someone came up to me and said, you know, they're doing country line dancing at the senior center. Whoa, and on my days off, Monday and Tuesday, I'm going down. So that's when I joined, way back then, the senior center. I did country line dancing, then the yoga classes started, Zumba started, Tai Chi started, and I joined it all. And I also joined a silver Silvertone Singing Group, which I'm still doing. In fact, yesterday we had rehearsals and we entertained the Western Civic Center. We do go to the different nursing homes and they love it because music and animals are very helpful for those that are confined, as we all know. And then I finally decided, well, I think it's getting time for me to retire, because all my friends were retired. I wasn't ready. But at the age of 2, I thought, it's time. I was still climbing ladders, and I thought, no, I better do it. I'm 95 years old. I will be 96 in September. People look at me and say, what is your secret? I don't know if you want to call it a secret, but I am very blessed. And I think you can keep busy, move all you can. I have a stationary bike, which my family got many years ago because you couldn't always walk outside and exercise in the winter. I still do it every morning, and I have classes. I'm now a resident in Hill House. I've been there 2.5 years. They have a lot of activity there, and I enjoyed it all. I'm a people person. I love it, and I love the activity. And I think if you're able to try to keep busy mentally and physically. I do crossword puzzles, word game, all different sorts of games. And I love people, and I volunteer a lot, even where I'm living. And it really does keep you going, and it's very healthy. And I wanted to thank you so much. And I'd much rather be dancing than talking up here.
Oh, let's hear for Jerry. It's a little intimidating, just a smidge. Jerry, I need to retile my bathroom. I'm wondering if you can squeeze a little time in between your line dancing. She said, I'll be over. Yeah, she's like the busiest woman. It is amazing. And yeah, how old are you again? 95? What? 96 in September. Oh my God. If you all wouldn't mind just turning off your phones, it can be a little bit disconcerting when we hear the ring. So anybody whose ringer is on, if you could turn that off, that would be great. Jerry, thank you so much. And you know, in finding her story, part of it was really about community. Not part of it. It's about community. It is about moving and staying young. But also, she said when she had so much loss in the late 70s, going back to work at the thrift shop was truly her salvation. And so I love being here in the Greenwich community and being reminded that, you know, don't forget about your community. It's really a precious thing. And it's something that when you really need it, it's there for you. And that's when you really start appreciating it. So Jerry, I loved your story about that. Also, my mom, we all give to the thrift shop, but we used to be in summers in a little, very small village. And there was a little thrift sale there. And my mother would always tell me, she said, I love giving things to the thrift shop, but it's very disconcerting when you go to a cocktail party and you see your shirt on the person you're having a drink with. So I'm just wondering, Jerry, did you ever see any, you probably see the clothes like all over town. So interesting. Anyway, moving along. Our next storyteller, her favorite singer, one of her most inspirational singers is Pavarotti. I was like, oh yes, of course. And she said his La Boheme is just the most wonderful thing. So please welcome to the stage Judith Jackson. Talk amongst yourselves for a minute while Judith makes her way. This was so, yeah, you could pull your chair a little bit more, man. Okay, there we go. There we go. Is the sound too loud? The sound or the sound? Okay, yeah. let's see how it is for you. Thank you. That was me, I think I was yelling. Okay, how's that sound? Can you hear everybody? Okay. This is my prop lady, Mary Chandra. She's a colleague of 30 years, and she and I have done a lot of work with spas, etc. How many of you have a calling? Well, I guess it's because I'm a Gemini, because I have 3. When I was a child, 8, I decided that I liked dancing in the theater and things like that, because I got taken to some shows in New York, and I would take a desk lamp or whatever and put it down on the floor and take some shawls and my mother's scarves and so, and do sort of like a Rita Hayworth kind of thing. And my mother decided to give me some real dancing lessons, to let me go to New York for ballet lessons. And I became a pretty good dancer. And so that was one of my callings. And I got chosen by Lucia Chase, who was the founder of the American Ballet Theater, and this was their school. And so I was really quite thrilled with that. But I also was very upset because I lived in Garden City, Long Island, and I saw all these little animals that would fall out of trees, die, and I decided that I had to do something about it. So I went and made up a little kit that had an eyedropper and some of my father's whiskey. And I would go around and see if I could find an open beak or a squirrel that lost its tail or whatever. So that was my healing self. And the third thing was that I really loved to write. And my mother bought me a little printing press that had rubber type that I would set. And I would go to church on Sunday and hear some inspiring things, at least to me. And then I would come, and this is age 10, I would set this tight and I would crank it, and I would have a little newsletter. And so I would give that to my friends, and I would sign it Credo, which means, of course, I believe. Then I found out that my father was an alcoholic, and I decided that I really had to help my mother and my little brother, who was 10 years younger than I, to, have some kind of work, job, something. And I started modeling when I was 12. And I was with a Conover agency, and it was as a kid model. And that went pretty well. And it got me out there. So I spent my childhood with adults, and I was a pretty confident kid. I was now in this school of the American Ballet Theater, and at one class, I had Nureyev standing ahead of me at the bar, and Margot Fontaine was, on the floor, and I was trying to keep up with these marvelous dancers. And I did pretty well at it. And I was walking down Broadway, and I saw Schubert Alley, and I said, I think I'll go in and ask Mr. Schubert if I can have a role or a dancing role in one of his shows. And I did.
I went in, I was 15 years old, and the secretary probably went in and said, hey, there's this kid outside that wants to be in one of your shows. And bless his heart, he opened his door and he said, come in. And I did. And he said he didn't have a show right then where, you know, I could really fit. But he knew someone that was really looking for someone like me. And he sent me over to the Copacabana. And I met the owner, which I guess was a privilege. And I had never been in a nightclub before. I didn't like the way it smelled. I thought it was kind of dark. And of course it wasn't, it was in the daytime. I really, Mary, you want to show this? This is what can happen when you get out there. I decided that I would have a job as one of the dancers. And I went home and said to my mother, Mother, I just got a job at the Copacabana and they're going to pay me $200 a week. And I was so excited. And she said, isn't that a nightclub? And I said, yes. And she said, well, I guess I'm going to have to take you there and bring you back. And I said, well, I'll be 16 soon, and then I can drive. And she was in this state of horror here. But in any case, I got a lot out of it because it was kind of brave for a kid of 15 to be on the floor with 6 other dancers who were used to doing their thing. And of course, I was really a dancer, you know, and they were kind of prancing around. But that I guarantee you I was the only virgin in the line. And my father, bless his heart, was sober that night, came to pick me up one time. And he was slim and tall and quite good looking, and he was probably in his 30s, you know. And so one of the girls said the next day, who was your date? And this went on. So what happened is that the stage manager of the Copa called Life magazine and said, we have the youngest Copa girl ever. And so they came and took some pictures, and I didn't realize that it was a 3-page story. The title of the story was The Teenage Siren. It was a little odd that I was also a Sunday school assistant. So when David Selznick saw this story, he sent for me, and I read for him, and he said, I'm going to make another Lana Turner out of you. And I thought, oh God, I don't want to be a Lana Turner. Oh well, anyway, and he wasn't making a movie at that time, but he had a summer theater. And I got to work with, as an ingenue, I got to work with Gregory Peck, Joseph Cotton, Dorothy, Diana Lynn, and Robert Mitchum. And that was the school, you know. So I then came back to Hollywood, and Selznick offered me another contract. As he was offering this contract, he began to advance towards me because I was now 18. And so I walked over to his desk, and I picked up the heaviest thing I could see, which was a paperweight, and I threw it at him. Luckily, I missed him. But in any case, I declined, you know, signing up for more Hollywood, because if you think that Harvey Weinstein was bad, every producer I went that Selznick sent me to that were doing a film and so forth, they would say things to me like, oh, we need to really work on the script together. I'm going down to Miami tomorrow, and you should come down with me and so forth. And I thought, he must think I'm really stupid. You know. But in any case, then I came back to the East Coast, did a little television, and then came my really great calling. And that was that I went to London to see a friend of mine. And when I got off the plane, she said, gee, you look tired. She said, you've got to come and have this treatment. And she didn't just say massage, she said treatment. And I went into this little muse, and it smelled wonderful. And it was all essential oils and the leading European aromatherapists in all of Europe. And I didn't know that. I didn't really quite know what aromatherapy was. And so you have the aromatherapy. And this is one book I wrote. But that was the second book, the sensual touch. Do you have that?
I don't have it.
Oh, okay. But I wrote the first American book on aromatherapy because when I was going back to New York, I thought I have to do something with this because that touch and a sort of quantum physics kind of thing that went on. And it wasn't just like a massage. And the essential oils go into your olfactory system. And this is where a lot of your feelings and senses and so forth and so on goes on. And you learn the power of the hand. She would quiver her hand over my body. And so I sat up and said, what's different about this? What kind of, it feels magical. I feel it all over from head to toe and so on. And she said, that idea is aromatherapy. And I said, you think I could do that? And she said, oh, she said, you have to have a massage training and then you have to come over here and take classes and so forth. And I said, I'm a Gemini and I'm going to do this. So what I did is I got a Connecticut license. That was after I began to really practice. So, but I did get a training and I went back and I said to myself, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And I did. I feel like a youngster though compared to 101 and 96 and so forth. So I'm going to be 90 next month. I am one of you, whoever is over 65. Thank you.
You're for Judith. That was fabulous. I'll have what she's having, right? I mean, my God. And you left some samples, right?
The health part of it.
Yeah.
All these kids that were taking ballet class had a Coke machine. And they were drinking, that kind of stuff. And I would go across 57th Street to a health food store and have a glass of vegetable juice with an all-grain muffin.
Okay, you're not normal. You are so not normal. Now, she has her own line of cosmetics, and she brought some samples for us in the front. So if you want to look like her at 90, I would listen up and get
I
one
never
of those.
had anything done. So.
Well, we are winding down. We've got our grand finale coming up. How are you all doing? Everybody doing all right? Holding up well? Great. So our final speaker for the night, he's actually a sax player. So when I asked him about his favorite musician or one of his favorite songs, he said, "Sting's The Shape of My Heart." because he plays it on the saxophone. Please welcome Joel Sullivan.
Somebody else's notes here. Hi. Can you hear me? Yep. Here we are on Long Island Sound. Great resource, I think. And I grew up on Long Island Sound, but the other side. And a little farther down. Yeah, if you-
Sorry,
we have to get you mic a little bit. I'll start. Okay, anyway, there, you got it?
Yeah.
So I grew up on the other side of Long Island Sound in Great Neck. Think about Great Neck as Greenwich looking this way on Long Island Sound, and Greenwich looking this way, but it was sort of the same. Beautiful suburb of New York, tree-lined streets, well-tended lawns, well-tended people, beautiful, well-kept houses, mowed lawns, predictable, lovely. This was 1955. The hit parade was topped that year with, anybody want to guess? Cherry pink and apple blossom white. There was 16 tons, remember that? There were 2 Davy Crockett songs, 2 ballads of Davy Crockett, but you get the idea. 1955, I was 11. And I was at the end of the block. This was called Lincoln Road. I was at the end of the block. One door down was David Weinberg. David Weinberg was a year older than I was, 12. He was fair, slight, but his parents were divorced. People didn't get divorced in Great Neck, not that I knew, not in those days. And I felt that gave him a little edge over the other kids, more, I don't know, privilege. He had stuff in his room that the rest of us didn't have. He had magic tricks. He had a zip gun in his drawer. He had, most important for the boys in the neighborhood, he had a big pile of Playboy magazines. And you didn't see stuff like that normally, except in National Geographic, so David was a big draw. Gotta get that. 2 doors down from David was Patty Mayer. You remember the Little Rascals, our gang?
Yes.
Remember Darla? Darla. Patty was Darla. Bangs, black hair, shiny black hair, very sweet, had leather shoes all the time. Wonderful. An inspiration. For some reason, when I was like 7, a few years before that, I pushed Patty in the mud. I don't know why exactly, but I pushed her in the mud. Got in a lot of trouble. The only trouble I was ever in, actually. Ever. Even since. I had to call her father and her mother separately and her to apologize. Okay. Then down the block, I'm giving you all the people in this little story. Then down the block, on the other side of Skank Avenue, was a kid named Billy Reynolds. We got looking back, he was the neighborhood bully. He was the kid who had a magnifying glass and burned up bugs. You're shaking your heads, folks. Well, you know people like that too. Oh, him? Oh, did you know Billy Reynolds? And there's no smell. There's no smell like that. There's no smell. There are those countries that eat bugs. That smell must permeate everywhere. Not great now. He also had firecrackers all the time. Blew up his hand once and wore a bandage to school, and you could see the blood coming through. Billy Reynolds. He also, now there are people. Anybody have cats here? He would take a cat and throw it around by his tail. He was a nasty kid. But you know, you're a kid and you don't think that. You go, maybe that's just what people do. What do you know? Billy Reynolds. So that's our block. I'm sure that there were people on that block who my parents knew, but you know, kids have their own little subculture, and that was it. One day when I was 11, and I don't know how this happened, but I found myself in a terrible fight with Billy Reynolds in Patty Mayer's driveway. Go figure. Blood coming out of my elbows because of the gravel, and we're fighting. A whole bunch of kids all around, and I had never had a fight before in my life, and never since. No physical altercation with anyone, but somehow, and you'll know what I mean, you get involved in somebody else's pantomime, somebody else's existence. And I felt even at the time, it's like I had been invited, I'd gone to a play, and I had gone up on stage, been asked to go up on stage, and I was part of a play. I didn't know how I got to be part of it, but we're fighting. And at some point, Max Mayer came out, the guy I had to apologize 2 years before, and he said, break that up, kids, break that up. So we broke up the fight. And then David Weinberg comes up to me, and I wish I knew the word dude in those days. You'll see why in a second. David Weinberg said, this fight's not over. You guys meet tomorrow on my front yard, my front lawn, and you fight it out. And if I knew that word, I'd say, dude. That ain't happening. What the world are you talking about? And I didn't tell anybody. I went home. I don't know how we ate dinner. And I'm not used to pugilism. And I don't know how I slept that night, but came high noon the next day, found my way to that front yard of David Weinberg. And here's the deal. The front yard is surrounded by hedges all the way around. And nobody could see it, no witnesses, a long driveway, but that was it. And David Weinberg said, okay, like, you guys face each other. Not a good time for it. Dude, you sure? When I say three, when I count to three, you two come out punching. Okay. 1, 2, 3, and I go like this, and I must have hit him in the place that a solar. I don't even know what it was. But Billy hopped up on one leg like this, all the way around the perimeter of the property, and hopped all the way home. And I actually looked over the hedge and I said, "Damn, Billy's running away." It's nuts. David Weinberg and I look at each other like, that was the neighborhood bully, and he's, what? So everything calmed down. No, I wasn't bothered. I was asked, did you think about it? No, I didn't think about anything. It was over. That's over. Grant said the same thing. It's over. Right? But I went back to my normal life. And then a week later, my parents said, we got to tell you something. I said, what? He said, seems that David Weinberg and Billy Reynolds were playing in David Weinberg's room, and Billy Reynolds shot and killed David Weinberg. Oh, shot him in the head with a zip gun. And I tell you, it's a true story, and obviously I've lived with it forever. And I can't really come to terms with it. I have no one to ask what happened to all these people. David left town. David's mother left town. Billy Reynolds was never heard from again. And I was left with, I suppose, an understanding that we all live with, I think, every day. And that is, out of nowhere, something can happen, some absurd event. But one thing occurred to me, kids die. You know, you said that prayer, I too, when I was a kid, I told my mother, when she said, now I laying down to sleep, but if I should die before I wake, I said, I'm not doing that one, but this reminded me, that could have been me. And it touched me to the point where I think about it often. And I think you and I, all of us know that, it's another lyric to a song, but I didn't know that song then, but we're all skating away on the thin ice of a new day. And day after day, enjoy your life when you have it.
Joel Sullivan, everybody. So for anything but a powerful message. Enjoy every day, and I think we really enjoyed today. Thank you to our 6 incredible storytellers. And thanks to Friends Historical Society, and thanks to all of you for coming. Have a great night.